Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stu here from Spain Speaks with an update on the current situation here in Spain. And yesterday, as we know, Spain reopened its doors to tourism. But the question people were asking themselves at airports around the country yesterday was more like tourists, what tourists? But more about that in just a moment. Firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Lots of comments, lots of debate happening there as usual. Thanks to people that supported the channel through a donation. You can see your names here. Thanks to people that bought merchandise, and a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon for your support. Now let's get into the news, and as I said, yesterday was the day that Spain finally opened again to tourists, but anyone who was expecting an avalanche of tourists yesterday would have got a rude shock. As we can see from this headline, there is no news of the eagerly awaited British tourists. There's almost no news about British tourists. That is the summary of day one after the new Spanish government order allowing travellers from the UK to enter the country without restrictions or diagnostic tests for coronavirus. The main destinations are not noticing a significant increase in visits, at least for the moment, due to the slowdown caused by the mandatory checks on their return. When we return home, we will have to quarantine for 10 days. I've already had the first dose of the vaccine and I'll get the second one on July the 1st, Gavin complained on Monday on his arrival in Mallorca from Manchester. So no sign of many British tourists yet. And remember that Spain also opened its doors for people from 9 other countries for tourism purposes, but no sign of them either. Some flights from the UK did arrive at various airports around the country, but apparently they were people that mainly have second residencies here and were eager to check out their properties. So what's the problem? Is it like what Gavin said there, that 10-day quarantine rule is putting people off travelling to Spain at the moment? Or is it the fact that UK ministers are saying that Britain should not be holidaying in Spain yet? Britons have been urged not to travel to Spain after the country opened its doors to tourists from the UK. Spain has lifted its restrictions on holidaymakers from the UK, but the business minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, has urged people not to go there unless there is an urgent reason. Despite this, Fernando Valdés, Spain's tourism secretary, suggested Spain could be added to the UK's green list in the next government review, meaning travellers would not have to self-isolate on their return to England. So a fairly clear message there from the UK government. People should not be holidaying in Spain just yet. But as we saw, the tourism minister here in Spain confident that Spain will be added to the green list sometime soon. However, not all government officials here in Spain are unhappy about the fact that not many Britons chose to come to Spain yesterday, and Spain's chief health officer, Fernando Simón, on the calls for tourism said we must reduce the euphoria. I prefer not to shout that Spain is open. The director of the CCAES here in Spain, Fernando Simón, has admitted some concern among technicians about calls for international tourism from the government. It is not a problem of whether or not you can come from the UK and that the associated risk can be controlled. I think that from a technical point of view, the problem is euphoria, explained the epidemiologist from the Ministry of Health. I think we need to tone down the euphoria a bit. Spain is now open to tourism. Let anyone who wants to come can be said shouting or softly. As a technician, I prefer it to be said softly, he said, after explaining that the arrival of tourists will be positive for the country and may have a minor impact thanks to the control measures and vaccination coverage. So Mr. Simón there hinting that he doesn't want everybody to know that Spain is open for tourism. And his suggestion is to tone down the euphoria. Now, one country here in the EU that is trying to put British people off travelling there at the moment is Germany. They seem to be worried about some of the different variants of COVID-19 that are flying around at the moment. And as we can see from this headline, the rise of the Indian strain in the UK puts tourism on alert ahead of the summer. The alarm bells are ringing again in the health departments across Europe. Just when the old continent was working on a unity of action to save the summer season, and from there try to cement the economic recovery, a bombshell has shaken the EU partners with Germany's decision to impose quarantines on all travellers entering the country from the United Kingdom. Angela Merkel's government has taken this decision following a recommendation by the Robert Koch Institute, which has warned of the growing incidence of the Indian variant in the British Isles, which has led it to close borders since last Sunday and only allow entry to those who quarantine for 2 weeks. So again, very, very confusing what's going on at the moment. Spain is completely open to people from the United Kingdom, vaccinated or not, no PCR test required, yet Germany has decided to close its borders to people from the UK unless they're willing to quarantine for 2 weeks. Explain that. Now, the cruise ship industry is trying to get up and running again after it was completely smashed last year by the pandemic, we saw various cases around the world of cruise ships where the virus situation got out of control, and that led to many countries banning cruise ships altogether, and hopes to relaunch the sector this year have got off to a rocky start. As we can see here, a cruise ship has had to dock in Palma de Mallorca to disembark 5 COVID positives travelling on board. The cruise ship Odyssey of the Seas is waiting in the Bay of Palma to dock in the port to disembark at least 5 COVID-19 positive crew members. According to the government delegation in the Balearic Islands, the cruise ship requested authorization last night from Foreign Health to transfer 5 corona-positive crew members who for the moment are asymptomatic. The Odyssey of the Seas of the Quantum class of the Royal Caribbean Shipping Company is newly built and comes from Civitavecchia, Italy, to set sail for Miami, USA. With 168,800 tons and 340 meters in length, it has a capacity for 4,805 passengers and 1,551 crew members. So jumping on a cruise ship at the moment and sailing around the Mediterranean is still a little bit too risky in my opinion. Now, when it comes to the health situation here in Spain, the news is relatively good. As we can see from this headline, incidence drop eases 2 weeks after the end of the state of emergency. The end of the state of emergency has not led to the spike in infections that many epidemiologists feared, not at least quickly and clearly. After 2 weeks without the rule in force, which covered measures such as the closure of autonomous communities or the curfew, the incidence in Spain continues to fall, although at an ever slower rate after a month of clear decline. So the incidence rate here in Spain dropping, and that's good news because as we know, Spain wants to get onto many countries' green lists so that people can travel to the country without any restrictions. Now let's have a look at a summary of the health situation countrywide. We can see that that incidence rate is now down to 129. The amount of cases recorded on a daily basis is down 29% on previous data. There are currently 5,614 COVID patients hospitalized around the country. There are 1,627 COVID patients in ICUs, and daily COVID-related deaths are also down 29%. And when it comes to the vaccination program here in Spain, we can see that complete vaccination has been achieved on 17% of the population, or in other words, 8.1 million people, and 35.2% of the population, or 16.7 million people, have received at least 1 dose. Now, there's a very active mask-wearing debate going on here in Spain, especially when it comes to wearing masks outdoors. I don't think there's any doubt that people will still have to wear a mask when they go into indoor public spaces, but when it comes to wearing a mask outside, the debate is heating up. However, it seems that a majority of people don't want to drop the outdoor mask-wearing rule just yet. As we can see here, experts say it is too soon to remove the mask outdoors. In Madrid or Barcelona, we can come into contact with hundreds of people. No authority wants to be left out of the picture of the end of the pandemic, the day when we can all say, if possible in earnest, that the crisis is behind us. But it is not going to come sooner just by wishing for it. According to a recent survey by Sigma Dos for El Mundo newspaper, 68.4% of Spaniards are in favour of not eliminating the mask in the open air, and experts are of the same opinion. So there we go. According to that survey done by the newspaper El Mundo, 68.4% of people are in favour of wearing masks outdoors for the time being. Now, I've had to move the video inside because my neighbour to the left has started using a chainsaw in his backyard. So a little bit noisy. But let's have a look at some of the comments from previous videos. One here from Ivan. Gracias, Stuart. We decided to go on and celebrate our wedding in Barcelona in October. Let's hope things do not change for the worst. Have a great day. Yeah, Van, thanks for the comment, and that's wonderful news that you are going ahead with the wedding. I know there was a bit of doubt there considering the health situation in Catalonia and the fact that you had invited guests from different countries around the world to attend. And you're right, let's hope that things continue to improve from a health point of view and that we manage to get this COVID-19 situation under control for good. One here from Michael. Stuart, it's interesting to note that the UK FCDO advises not to visit Spain for non-essential purposes except the Canary Islands. Yeah, Michael, thanks for the comment, but as far as I know, the whole of Spain, including both sets of islands, the Balearics and the Canaries, are on the UK's amber list, and there are no exceptions. There has been a push by the Spanish government and the island governments to try to get some type of travel corridor happening between the UK and those sets of islands, but as far as I know, it hasn't happened yet. And when you have a look at the UK government website at the list of the amber countries, you will see that it definitely says Spain, including the Balearic and Canary Islands. One here from Luis. Hola Stuart, I'm planning to do El Camino Portugués in mid-August. I'm fully vaccinated and coming from the USA. I have my proof of vaccination. Do I need to have a PCR test to enter Spain, Portugal? Gracias. Yeah, Luis, thanks for the comment. As I mentioned, as of June the 7th, people coming from countries like the United States will need to have proof that their vaccinations have been completed with one of the vaccines that is recommended by the EMA. However, when it comes to a negative PCR test, I'm not sure what the rules are on that here in Spain. I'm trying to find out whether people from the United States will need to have a negative PCR test, but it's not easy to find clear information on the topic. However, I do believe that if you're going to fly into Portugal, you will need to have a negative PCR test. One here from Hatem. What's interesting is that China is on the list of countries which are invited to visit, yet at the same time the Chinese vaccination is not approved and people who receive the Chinese vaccine aren't able to visit. That means Chinese people cannot go to Spain for holiday. Yeah, Hatem, thanks for the comment. As we saw yesterday, there are some 10 countries that are allowed to travel to Spain for tourism purposes at the moment, and China was one of those. The UK also, Australia, New Zealand, I think Israel, but I can't remember the rest of the countries. But I think people that travel to Spain from those countries can enter the country without proof of vaccination, and they also don't need to have a negative PCR test. But as of the 7th of June, people from all other non-EU countries that want to come to Spain on holiday will need proof of completed vaccination, as we just saw, but as I also just said, not sure on a negative PCR test. One here from Tony. Stuart, I may be wrong, but I thought most of Spain's regional borders were still closed. If so, how can I fly to Malaga and drive to my place in Extremadura? Yeah, Tony, thanks for the comment. Mainland Spain is completely open at the moment. You can travel freely around the country. There are no restrictions in place. You can travel easily from Andalusia to a place like Extremadura. You can then go to Extremadura to Castilla-La Mancha if you want. Then you can go on to Madrid, and you could also head down to a place like Alicante with no controls. However, there are some places in Spain that do have some restrictions, for example, curfews, and you might find that some basic health areas around the country are still confined. But when it comes to regional borders, they are completely open. There is a slight problem if you wanted to travel to a place like Mallorca, because Mallorca is demanding that people arrive there with a negative PCR test from mainland Spain if they haven't been vaccinated. But apart from that, the country is completely open. One here from Ray. Hi Stu, a bit off topic, but how did you learn Spanish so well? You said in an earlier video that you learnt it before you came to Spain. Did you go to classes or online learning? My wife and I hope to retire to Spain as an Irish citizen. We can do this, but it would be great if we could learn before we went. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, Ray, thanks for the comment, and a very good idea that you and your wife learn a little bit of Spanish before you come to live in the country. I would recommend trying to get a B1 level as a minimum level, and then you should be able to have basic conversations with people, and it will make your life here in Spain a lot easier. But remember this very important expression, habla más despacio, por favor. And when it comes to my experience with the Spanish language, I started learning back in 1993 or maybe 1994. I went to a place in Australia called TAFE, took a basic class. I think it was 1 or 2 hours a week. I got a minimum level. I learned how to speak in the past, the present, and the future at a very basic level. And then I decided to go to university and do a degree in Spanish. And during that time, my Spanish went up and up and up. But I also combined that with traveling. I came to Spain to improve my language one Christmas, and I also went to Argentina the following Christmas to get a look at the way Spanish is spoken there and some of the differences. So I'm glad that I did learn the language before I came to live here, because I was able to hit the ground running and it made things a lot easier, especially when it came to getting a job. And finally, one here from Lee. Get your vaccine notice yet? A few 55-year-olds in my neighbourhood just got the call today. Normally I completely ignore my mobile phone, but I've been eyeballing it regularly for the last week, LOL. Yeah, Lee, thanks for the comment, and the answer is no, I have not received my SMS or my phone call from the Madrid community telling me that my vaccination is ready. I'm just going to have to wait a little bit longer. A friend of mine was vaccinated last Friday with the first dose of the Moderna vaccine, and he said his arm was very, very sore for about 2 days. In fact, he said he could hardly lift it for the first 24 hours, but apart from that, no other symptoms. And one of my students, who is 56, received her dose of the Janssen vaccine last Saturday, and she was bedridden for 24 hours. She had a high fever, she felt nauseous, and she said that she has never sweat so much in her life. But on Monday she was fine, so it was just that immediate reaction. On that note, I'll start to wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the situation out as you normally do. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.